Okay, great. So we just want to welcome everybody to. We actually have something interesting happening today. So Simar is my beautiful and extraordinary and wonderful wife, and she is the founder of a company and a podcast called Glamour and Purpose. And my name is Nathan McCullough, and I am an integrative nutritionist and a holistic health coach, and the founder of a company called Rising Phoenix Wellness. And I also have a podcast. And so today we are doing a combination of podcasts. So it's going to be a little bit different because it's not so much an interview as much as it is just kind of a conversation about some interesting topics that we have been discussing recently. So for those of you who maybe don't know Simar, she is a certified, is it NASM or NASM?
NASM.
NASM or NASM certified personal trainer. And she's also a sports nutritionist and a beauty expert and an entrepreneur and an all around extraordinary woman who is really passionate about empowering other women to live the life of their dreams.
Oh, thank you. Thank you,
You're
Nate.
welcome. So, do you want to say anything about the kind of what you guys are up to at Glamour and Purpose?
Yeah, I mean, with Glamour and Purpose, we love to really help people with their health, beauty. We are big believers in actually looking at your life holistically. So it really does matter what you're doing, you know, in your health area and your finances, they're all connected. So with Glamour and Purpose, we actually help people with their health, beauty, and their lifestyle. And we're passionate about working with people holistically. And I think with that, our topic today comes up, which is something that we've been discussing lately, and that's anxiety, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in broadly speaking, so for like in Rising Phoenix Wellness, right? So I'm a recovering alcoholic, and so my podcast is about basically helping people through blocks, trauma, healing any um, things that have happened in the past, and helping people move forward powerfully. And so we were having a conversation recently about a discovery that you had about anxiety, because anxiety is something that I've also dealt with. When I was going through my recovery process, it was extreme. So I had more what I would call panic disorder, which is periodic feelings, experiences where I felt like I was going to die. And so it was like really extreme anxiety, to the point where I had to be hospitalized a couple of times, because in that moment it's like you really do feel like it's true that in that moment you're about to die. And so through working through my own past traumas and my own negative self-belief and some conversation and beliefs that I had about myself, I've gotten myself, to a place in my life now where I don't experience um, anxiety, and that I definitely don't have panic disorder. And I do have, I get nervous and I have fears and I get scared sometimes, and I still have, limiting beliefs and conversations in my head, but I don't have what I would call what I called then anxiety. And I've also shifted something during my recovery path. I've shifted also my thought process about alcoholism and what it means to be someone who is an alcoholic. And so it's an interesting conversation that I've been having with myself for a while. And when you came the other day and and shared with me about a breakthrough that you had, it brought back a lot of those thoughts and experience, the thought process that I've been having about that. So I'll just share briefly about that, and then maybe you can connect with the with the experience that you had the other day. So for those of you who may not be familiar with like 12-step programs or recovery, excuse me, one of the things that happens in the beginning of meetings is people go around and they introduce themselves. And so generally what is expected is that you introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Nathan. I'm an alcoholic. And there's sort of an identification in that moment with your disease or your, whatever you want to call that, your condition. And when I was early in recovery, I think there was something really powerful about owning that thing, right? So instead of like being in denial, which is what I was in for, like maybe 10 years, there was a shift where it was like, okay, I'm going to own this thing. My name is Nathan. I'm an alcoholic. And so there was like an ownership element of that. And then as time went on, and the more that I learned about trauma healing and recovery and healing, that process, I've learned that actually language is very powerful. Mm-hmm. And especially language that's associated with your identity. So I am fat. I am strong. I am weak. I am fill in the blank, right? Whatever comes in at the end of that sentence it's very powerful, the conversation that we have with ourselves, because whatever you fill in the blank with, that becomes your truth. It becomes who you are. And anytime you do that, right? So if I say I am an alcoholic, right? There is a point at which it goes from ownership to now I'm labeling myself and I kind of get boxed in. So it's if I am an alcoholic, it's hard to also be, something else. So if I want to create a possibility for myself, it's difficult if there's an association at the level of identity, meaning who I am for myself, the story that I have about who I am. And so I've been thinking about that a lot because, now I identify myself as a person in recovery and not necessarily as an alcoholic, because not only do I not drink anymore, but I don't think about drinking anymore. And I don't get triggered when I see other people drinking. I was at a concert last night, listening to music, and everybody around me was drinking. And I'm kind of paying attention to my own self, and there was no body sensations for me. So I know, like, that's something that craving is something that I'm free from, which doesn't mean my recovery path is over, right? It doesn't mean that I'm healed or cured in that sense, because that's not the way that it works. But it does mean that I feel like I'm in a place in my life where I can change the conversation about who I am.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so powerful, just being able to realize the conversation that you have about yourself. And I'll share, the breakthrough that I had, because for the past couple of months, with working from home and doing different things, I had this whole conversation in my head that I have anxiety. And I was starting to really experience anxiety, quite a lot of it actually. And I was and I was like, I've been, really sort of looking for solutions for that. Like, what do I need to heal? What do I need to work on? Do I need to do tapping on this? Stuff like that. So, looking at so many different options of how I can heal myself, like whatever triggers that anxiety. And I couldn't find anything that was helping. And then I was in this seminar, and something that someone said just really got me present to what was really happening, you know? And I just, like, there was this moment where I had this like realization. This woman was sharing about how she had been dealing with anxiety for the past 5 years, and she is a writer, and she wasn't able to write for the past 5 years because the anxiety that would get triggered was just, it would just stop her, and that creativity couldn't come out. And I'm sitting there thinking, and she's like, she had a huge breakthrough in that, and overnight, like, her anxiety is gone. And here I am sitting there thinking, like, what could it be? Like, how could it be gone overnight? Like, you would think that something like this would, you know, take sessions of healing, time, you know, something. Like, it's gonna take time. People just think that something like this is just gonna take time. There's that belief, that this is going to take a long time to get better, and it's going to incrementally get better because we're all used to this incremental living. And then I just, like, I kept thinking about it, and then suddenly I had this realization that I have a story. I have a story that I have anxiety. So every single time I have certain body sensations, I tell myself that, oh my God, I'm getting anxiety now. And it's like it could be something that I would feel in my stomach, right? And someone would say something, or something would just trigger it, and I would have this sensation in my stomach. And I would tell myself that, oh my God, I'm having anxiety. And then I'll have these spiraling thoughts, which would be like, oh my God, it's getting worse. Oh my God, this is a lot. And, and before you know
Yeah.
it, I can't actually function, like, I stop breathing deep. I'll have this, like, whole sort of body sensation, which I've told myself is anxiety. And you know what? The truth is that growing up, I never had anxiety. And not to say that I never had worry. I had worry. I was dealing with issues. I had stuff that I was, not happy about and that I was worried about. But I never had anxiety because, believe it or not, I grew up in India and we didn't have the word anxiety. That, like, people just didn't use the word anxiety. And so I didn't have any association with this word called anxiety. Like, oh, there's a thing called anxiety. When you feel this way, then that means that you're having anxiety. Like, that just wasn't there, so I never had that. And then I moved to New Zealand, and in the Western culture, anxiety, actually in India now as well, because people are more aware, they're communicating, right? So the word is sort of gone around and people know about it. And I'm a big believer that, honestly, like, if the word wasn't around, I I won't have anxiety, because I didn't have this kind of anxiety. I feel like I'll have, what I've realized for myself is that there are certain body sensations that I would have, which is, that feeling in my stomach. And then I would tell myself that, oh my God, I'm having anxiety right now. Oh my God. And then, it just, like, spirals onto the next thought. Or what if it gets worse? I need to do something about it right now. I need to, like, calm down. And the more that I let myself spiral down that hole, the worse it gets. And the more I keep thinking about finding solutions for it, the worse it gets. Because I keep telling myself that, oh my God, I'm having anxiety. And and I just had this is huge for me, because this is something I've been dealing with for some time. And I just realized that I'm I'm only having a body sensation. It could honestly be because of indigestion, nothing else. You know, like, why does this particular body sensation have to mean that this is anxiety? And since I realized that this is a story that I have, and it's really like I'm trying to look for a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. It's a body sensation that I have, which could be caused because of indigestion. And I have
Hmm.
association with that body sensation that this is anxiety, you know? And honestly, like since I had this realization, it's been a few days now, and throughout the day there are different times when I'll have that body sensation, or when I can feel my heartbeat a little bit faster, and I just tell myself that, oh, I think I must be something I ate, or maybe I'm just, maybe it'll just go away, maybe it's just indigestion. And and I find that it doesn't spiral down, it doesn't get crazy the way that it was getting crazy. And it was getting crazy because I would make it go crazy because of the spiraling thoughts. So essentially what I've discovered is that anxiety is just really thoughts that are just spiraling. They're just out of control. It's like Eckhart Tolle. I was reading his book, The Power of Now, this morning. And he says, he's like, human beings have a disease. It's called uncontrollable thinking. Like we can't
Yeah.
stop thinking. Like
Yeah.
if at any point, like if I said to you that, Nathan, stop thinking, it's you just can't, right? This is the
Mhm.
disease. Like this is the problem. Is this crazy thoughts that just keep going, and I'm like, oh my God, I this realization just really changed my life, because I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is like a machinery, just like he says, it's like he's like, your thoughts are on automatic, even though you think that you are thinking them, they're being thought on their own. It's like you are possessed by another entity that's doing the thinking for you, except that
Mhm.
you think, you believe that that's you. But the moment you stop to observe the thinking that's happening, you become separate from that. And
Mhm.
it's incredible. And that's what, like, anytime now when I have this sensation, I just like stop and I just get present. Listen to the sound of the clock, listen to other sounds that are around, look around, get present in this moment. Like the second I get present in this moment, the anxiety is gone. I can feel my breathing, I can feel what's happening around me, but the anxiety is not there. So,
Mhm.
my biggest discovery in this whole process is that anxiety is essentially spiraling thoughts. And this word, the
Mhm.
meaning that we've given to it, like this, like it's something that's out of your control, you know?
Yeah. So there's the physical element, and then there's the story about it, right? I think that's the thing that's really important to separate. Is that's not to say, for the people that are out there, it's not to say that the bodily sensations that go with feeling anxious or whatever, it doesn't mean that that's not real, because those sensations that can be there, but then you layer over top of this word, the story called anxiety, and then it begins to snowball, and it becomes something else. So I think of like when I think of my own recovery, I do think that's important, that because I think of it in terms of there is a chemical aspect, you know what I mean, when you have a substance in particular, right? So there's a chemical aspect, then there's a behavioral aspect, and then there's the more, if you want to call it, a spiritual aspect or something like that, right? So it's not so the ultimately the solution is actually over here in the spiritual side of things, or let's call it the mental side of things, if people don't identify with the spiritual side. So there's kind of like the chemical, the physiological, or the somatic, the part of the body, and then the mindset or the mental side of things. And I do think, there are, especially in the beginning, because it's all about the belief, right? So you can't just tell somebody that's having anxiety, oh, by the way, that's a story, it doesn't exist, right? It's not gonna help them. So
Well,
you do have to deal with like the chemical part, right? And sometimes that means medication, sometimes it means different things, right? And then you also work on it at the behavioral level, which means, deep breathing, meditation, going for a walk, like the things that you were talking about in terms of listening to the clock. That's an interesting one, right? Because our brain is very rhythmic. It has like its own internal circuits. So if you listen to something that is predictable, you can focus on that. It can take your focus off of the spiraling thoughts, right? So I do think it is important that it's not like this thing just like disappears, right? You do have those the different elements. So I think you have to, it is important to work on those different areas. But I think what you're saying is really important, because ultimately it's like the placebo effect. There's the placebo effect is in our medical system, where if you believe that a medicine is going to work, a lot of times the percentages are very high, right? It's like over 70%. If you think it's going to work, even if it's a sugar pill, it works, right? So what's going on there, right? It's the power of the mind over your physiology. And then the placebo also has, there's another side to that coin, right? What they call the nocebo effect, which means if you believe that it's not going to work, then the efficacy of that, even the medication, goes down. And we know that is real. So if you think about that in terms of your mind's belief has a huge impact on your physiology. So even things like rumination, negative thinking, negative self-talk, these have the power to then manifest themselves in your life. And the thing that I thought was so powerful that you were sharing with me the other day is you never had the word for anxiety, right? You never had the linguistic construction anxiety. You may have had the physiological reactions that were going on, but you never gave it power with your language that then created like a story and an experience until like you were sharing, right? Until you met me. And I was going through what I was going through. I know that you were there. I remember many times in the morning when I was going through, having withdrawals, things or whatever. And I felt like, my heart was like pounding, which was probably real. There was some elements of that were going on. But the reality is, if you can have a really anxious episode, and then, you would help with like massage and things like that. If you have a really anxious episode and then you can calm down and those symptoms go away, then that's very powerfully suggestive that a lot of it's up here.
Yeah.
Right. So you can have the physical side, and without giving the story power with your language, it just stays the physical side and it doesn't start snowballing into something bigger.
Yeah, totally. I mean, even
and can you share?
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just like
No, I just wanted you to also share about okay, so you share your thought, and then after that, can you share what happened with your bone? This happened a couple of years ago as well, but
Yeah.
it's another really powerful example of the mind over the body.
Yeah, I mean, just like what I was saying as well, like it's not like the sensations in my body have gone, but I've just, since I had this realization, I've taken away that word. And because I stopped saying that to myself, that it's taken away the power, so it's like if I have that body sensation in my stomach now, I just tell myself that it's something else. And before you know it, it's what even Mel Robbins, she says in her 5-second rule in the book as well.
Yeah, the 5-second rule.
Yeah, she talks about it. She's like, the second, you have like 5 seconds to decide what it is. So whatever you tell your brain in those 5 seconds as you're standing there, and she shares this story about her son who was having panic attacks, and she taught him the 5-second rule, where you just count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you tell your brain whatever you want about it. And she's like, if in that time you tell your brain that you're excited, not anxious, it's just going to believe it. So whatever we tell ourselves actually really, really, really matters. So even though like now I have the body sensations of what I termed as anxiety, they would come and go. It just like flows. It's literally like flowing in the whole day. And that's what's so powerful about language. I think it's like just, when I didn't have the word anxiety, and I wasn't using it in my life, I didn't have this crazy downward spiral of anxiety. It just wasn't normal. It's like, why would you have that? So weird,
Mm-hmm.
right? But now that I had the word anxiety in my vocabulary, and it looked like it's a real thing to me, like it's an actual thing that happens to people, that has a term and has a name, you know then so it must be real. That means if you get this thing, it's like a thing that's out of your control. It's like restless leg syndrome. When I was growing up, my legs would hurt at night. There's no word for that. I mean, it wasn't there when I was growing up. So I was like, oh, I must have run quite a lot, and that's why my legs are hurting. That's it. There was nothing more. But then I hung out with some of my cousins who'd come visiting from, US, and they're like, oh, I get restless leg syndrome at night. I'm like, there's a syndrome? Like it's like it's a thing? Like I get that.
Yeah.
What is that? What does it mean? You know? And that's what language does. We have to really sort of be aware of what are the words that we're using constantly. And I'll share the incident that you're talking about as well. A couple years ago, and you were there through the whole thing. I went to see this woman who did this like scan. It was like one of those new machine type things. I don't know what it was, what kind of scanner it was. She just like scanned me with that thing. I stood on top of it, and she said it's very accurate, almost as much as an MRI machine. I don't know what it was. Anyway, I stood on that and I sat down, and she she told me that I have osteoporosis. And this was a few years ago, and here I am sitting there, and she's like, I just wanted to let you know that you have osteoporosis, and this is what it looks like. And she drew a diagram of a bone, and she put like big circles on top of it. She's like, this is what it looks like. Your bones have like big spaces in them, and it's so bad that if you even like try to lift something really heavy, your bones would just crumble. Oh my God. It was like the worst thing that I could ever hear from someone. And at that time, for whatever reason, I wasn't feeling well. So whatever she said, I just like absorbed it. And I really believed it. And it was insane. And and since then, you know what happened, right? Because since then, you kept encouraging me to work out as I used to. But for 9 months, I refused to work out because I felt like my bones would crumble or something really bad would happen to me if I did that. And honestly, like I really believed it so much that I had actual pain in my body. I had pain in my body all the time, my legs and my arms, my backbone, my neck. And I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what happened to me. But how could this happen to me? I'm so young. And after 9 months, luckily, I went to New Zealand, and I went to see my chiropractor, which I normally always do. And she took some x-rays, and she just like looked, she came to see me, and she's like, oh my God, Simar, look at your x-rays. You have amazing bones. And And honestly, like I hadn't even talked to her about any of the whole story, this whole thing that I was dealing with, you know. And and she looks at my x-rays and she's like, you have amazing, well, look at that whole skeleton, like such good health. And here I am standing there, and she said that to me, and I just like, that moment I was like so overwhelmed by this thing. I was like near tears. I'm like, oh my God, 9 months. I have had pain in my body. And that's it. Like when she said that, and then she did the adjustment that I needed, next day, all of that pain was gone. All of that pain in my spine, my legs, arms, everything just went back to, normal, no pain. And she told me, she's like, you are going to have to really start working out though, you've lost a lot of muscle mass. And I'm like, thank you, yes, oh my God. So it's like, just makes you think, like, power of suggestion. Even when you go to see someone that might be an expert at something, you have to still be aware of what you're taking on. You don't necessarily need to believe other people's ideas about your health, about what you're dealing with. Someone might diagnose you something, but how do you know that that's true, right? I mean, I'm not saying that, disregard your doctor's advice, but I'm just saying that, like, in my personal experience, I went to see this expert and she said what she said, and I just really took it on, and it was completely untrue. It wasn't even real. And I had pain in my body. I had all the symptoms that I thought someone in my condition would have. So just makes you think, like, to what degree does our mind play in this whole thing, in everything that we feel, everything that we're dealing with? Like, to what degree is it made up?
Hmm. Yeah, and I remember, and I think the thing that's really important there is, especially if you're in a situation where you're worried or you feel like something is wrong, and then someone gives you a solution to that problem, or a reason or an explanation that then fits with whatever, narrative that you might have at that time, or you're in a really suggestible state, it just becomes totally real. Because I remember you guys came back, and I'm like with you every day. I see your body. I'm like, this is not right. But you were like, no, it's right. Look at the test. It's all here. And then I remember for like a year, I felt totally helpless, because I'm like, this is ridiculous. This woman, whatever she's saying to you is not true. But you had the belief that this is true. So it didn't matter what I said.
Yeah.
And it was just like your mind was already made up in this area that there's something wrong, and it has a name, and it looks a particular way, which means it's got reality, right? And so anything outside of that was not possible. So thank God you went to someone else who you trust, right? Because that trust was already there with her.
Yeah.
And she gave you a totally different story. And then at that moment, your brain had to really deal with conflicting truths, right? And I think what I do think is also extra interesting about that is, because you did believe that you had problems with your bones, you let your muscles atrophy, right? Which would actually create the problem that you were fearing. So, had you not gone to Lisa and had her tell you that, who knows where you would have been a year down the track, muscles totally atrophied, which would have given your bones basically no structure, and they would have inevitably, for sure, gotten brittle, and you would have created the thing that you were afraid of. So it just makes me, that idea is something that I feel like is so present, because in our, and especially in our Western model, right? I'll just speak for the Western model. We give so much medication, And we have so many conversations about this disease, that syndrome, and I know that the intention is to help the person like point at something, and that there might be some sort of pathology or something going on. But it's the think of just cancer, anxiety. These words are so negatively charged that it creates a physiological reaction in the body, which can then snowball, turn into a story, and then you can just you're way down that track, you know. And the other thing that you said that I thought was so powerful, because it rings true from my experience so much, is that as soon as you decide that you have a problem, you immediately start looking for solutions. And that search for the solution reinforces the problem. And it's the actually the looking for solutions that makes you feel so much more like there's a problem. And I know for me, this story that I'm an alcoholic became so pervasive in my life. I really got to the point where I believed that it was a brain disease. It was like some incurable, disorder that I have, and it's just part of who I am, you know. And some of that might actually, there might be some truth in the brain chemistry and the genetic side of things. There does seem to be some correlation there, but it doesn't have anything to do with who I am. That was the collapse, right? So I started believing that there was something wrong with me. There was something fundamentally wrong with me that was, different than other people. And then it became, that whole thing. And I remember I had an experience like you did with the chiropractor in the office. And you remember this, right? When I was in that coffee shop that one day. And I had been doing a lot of work, like recovery work. And so I think I was kind of like I was becoming a little bit more suggestible in the other direction, which is there is a solution. There's a spiritual solution to the problem that you have. And so I started believing, oh, maybe I'm not doomed to a life of just more of the same, repeat of the past. Maybe there is maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel. And so I started believing that a little bit more and a little bit more, and watching more, YouTube videos about it's okay that, the recovery is possible, all of that. And I remember, you know, I guess you could call it prayer at that time. I had really no relationship to any sort of higher power. Like, you're somebody that's always been, a great influence on me in terms of spirituality, because you guys have strong spirituality in your family. And then, even though my dad is a minister, I've never really had a relationship with, quote unquote, God. And I remember lying in bed that one morning, and I was looking up at the ceiling when you were laying next to me, and I remember saying, you know, Great Spirit, or God, or Mother Earth, or whatever might be out there. Like, for some reason, I can't fully just let go of this belief that there's something wrong with me and this problem. But I remember saying, like, just keep hanging in there and keep sending me messages, and like, be patient. Like, I'm coming around. And I remember that, like, just me having that conversation made a big difference in that moment. And I remember sitting up on the side of the bed, and I remember looking over to you and saying, Simar, I don't know what's happening, but I feel like there's some sort of like transitioning happening. Like, I literally just said a little, like, a prayer type thing. And I said to you, like, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I feel like there's a shift coming. There's a transformation coming, something like that. And I remember it wasn't but a couple hours later, I was at the coffee shop, and I got a message from a friend of mine named Dee, and it was just one of those, like, forwarding on type messages, you know. But and usually I wouldn't pay any attention to that. It's like, yeah, just like, just close it, move on with the day. But I remember in the beginning of the paragraph, it was about a man who wakes up in the morning and leans over and tells his wife something, right? Which is like, I'm like, oh my God, that's like exactly how my day started. What the hell is this? As I kept reading the message, the the message it was from a book called Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren. And the message in the message was that, like, whatever's going on, like underneath of it all, you're okay. And I remember that that message like pierced something. And I was in a suggestible enough state, I think, at that time, where whatever wall was up that I had had for so long was like pierced completely. And in that moment, I believed. I think this is the important part. Like, I really believed in that moment that I'm okay, and that there's nothing wrong with me. And I just remember that there was like a sensation that like went through my body, and all of a sudden, like, I just started like hysterically sobbing. I was in the middle of a coffee shop surrounded by a bunch of strangers. And I remember you and Deep walk through the door of the cafe. And I remember the look on your face and you're like, what's wrong? And I remember I couldn't even speak, but I just remember saying, it's okay. It's okay. Like, I'm okay. And all of that stress and just all of that belief that there was something wrong with me just started melting out of my eyes, right in the form of tears. And there was some energetic release that happened at that moment. And it's not like after that moment everything was rainbows and butterflies. I still had a lot of work to do on my recovery path, and I did have, I had, I think, one more relapse after that. But that was the moment when everything changed for me. I went from believing that there's something wrong with me to, no, that I'm okay exactly the way that I am, right? And to this day, I still believe that there's work to do and I'm okay. There's nothing wrong. And there's a gentleman by the name of Peter Crone who calls himself the mind architect. And he always says that, you know, when you're working with people that are in situations like this, right? The fundamental belief is there's no problem. You're whole, complete, and perfect exactly the way that you are, and there's no problem. Now we need to get to the source of the belief and extract that thing so that whatever you're dealing with dissolves. That's what he calls it. You don't solve problems, you dissolve them, which means you allow them to disappear. And that is something that when I heard him say that, it resonates so deeply with me. And that's why when you came to me the other day and you shared your experience, I'm like, that's it. That's what I've been trying to work out in my own mind, is that it's a linguistic construction that happens in language, and then it becomes a belief. And then that belief creates our conversation. And then that it's the conversation that our body will then follow. And that if you can sort of work backwards and then change your belief about that thing, then it can work its way out. And I really strongly believe that the majority of the things that people deal with, the problems, can be dissolved by doing that deeper work and separating what's going on, right? The physiological reactions from the story about the problem that we think that we have. And if you can do that deeper work, I think people can really heal.
Yeah, I think I would really have to agree to that, because I think it's also like, when you were talking to me about that morning, what you said put you in a receptive state,
Yeah.
even though you don't know how to get there, but you are willing to get there, right? I think that's really important, because, say for example, if before I had this realization that I'm having anxiety as a story, if I told you, like, if I wasn't receptive to this idea that this could possibly be belief driven or just thought driven or language driven, and if I'd come to you and told you that I'm really dealing with anxiety and you told me that this is like story driven, I would have fought you like crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to attack you.
Yeah, I would have been like, you are freaking kidding me. Like, this is insane. You know, this is a real thing that I'm experiencing. It's real for me. Okay? It's not, I'm not making it up. You can't say that I'm lying to you about this because I'm not.
Mhm.
I actually like
Right.
I would have found 100 ways to convince you that this is real, it's true, it's happening, it's actually happening, you know. And I think it's like that moment where you become receptive to not necessarily any particular idea, but just like being
Hmm.
open. Like,
Yeah.
I remember that before this, you know, realization happened, a couple days before that, I just said like a little prayer that, um you know, God, I don't know how to, I don't know how to help myself in this, so please help me. I have no idea how to get out
Hmm.
of this weird thing that has started, which I never used to have before, and I don't want it. So please help me with it. Please take it away from me. I don't know how to solve this problem because I had looked for solutions. Like, I had been trying to solve this problem for a while. Like, try this, try that, try this, try that. Like, so many different solutions and nothing's helping. Oh my God, nothing's helping. Oh my God, new solution. Oh, what about I try this technique? What about I try this technique? And nothing's helping. You know, I need, oh my God, I
Yeah.
need deeper trauma work maybe. Goodness, don't know what's wrong with me because you know, something's happened to me. And I think while I was doing all that, I was just not in a receptive state where my body could even communicate with me, where my mind could be receptive to really looking at like what's actually happening. And
Hmm.
I really do believe in, uh, you know, just like you said, I'm very connected to my spirituality. I do think that when we put ourselves in a receptive state, that maybe I need to stop looking and the solution might appear, you know? Like when I told myself that
Yeah.
I don't know what this is and I don't know how to deal with it. I was in a receptive state. And that's why when I was in that moment in that seminar, actually, you know, even like a day before that, one day before this happened, I was actually I was watching a movie. I'd already said that prayer and I was watching a movie, The Wonder Woman. And I was thinking to myself, like the scene where the Wonder Woman comes and she talks to the Victor guy. And she says to him, she's like, "Oh, how did you get your gifts?" And he says to her, and this is like totally not connected to me, not like, you know, I have any superpowers, but he says to her that gifts, if these are gifts, then how come it hurts so much? And not connected to my situation in any way, shape, or form, but I really connected to what he said about that pain. Like, if this is a gift, then how come it hurts so much? And in that moment when he said that, I just really, like, it really struck a chord with me, where I felt like there was a part of me that just questioned that, what if I think that this is a huge problem and that something is wrong, but this is a gift in disguise for me? And then I'm sitting there thinking to myself, how could this be a gift? It is painful, you know? But I was open to the idea, and it just came
Hmm.
to me that, well, the gift is that now you have to actually work on stabilizing your thoughts. You have to work harder on your mind than you've ever worked before,
Hmm.
you know? Like, if this wasn't here, I would honestly not have put in any thought into really, looking at how unpresent I am. Because I just, we're just like going through life like that. It's like day after day after day, I'm constantly having conversations in my head. You would be talking and I'll still be talking to myself. Whatever you say, I'll be saying something about it. There's something about that being said in my head where it's like you would say something in my mind's like, oh yeah, I agree with that. No, 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 I don't agree with that. I think that's a bit much. Like we all do that, right? Because someone's talking to us and we are having a conversation about whatever they're saying. Like our mind, the thinking, what I was saying about the possession, it makes so much sense because it's like you're possessed by some entity and you think that it's you. And while someone else is saying something, your entity is having a full-on discussion about it. Like,
and just totally unpresent.
Totally unpresent. And that's why people, that's why we get so we take things so personally because we're not even listening to what the other person's saying because we're so busy having this chit chat in my head. Like, it just makes you think that are we ever really having a conversation with someone else? Like, ever? Because all the time what's happening is someone is saying something and we're having a conversation with ourselves about it, not necessarily with that person, because we'll say something about, we'll say something like that, but the real conversation's happening in our head against your thought. And it happens all the time. And I feel like if it wasn't for this anxiety, which I thought was like a really painful thing that I'm dealing with, and something that I've realized is a gift now. If it wasn't for this, I wouldn't be right now here having this conversation about how unpresent I am most of the time.
Yeah, totally.
It's like
totally. Yeah, I mean, we.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, the connection on your end is getting a little bit unstable.
Yeah, it is. Sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah. So I was just going to say that just this past weekend, right? We did a virtual summit on addiction and recovery, and one of the main messages was that these painful experiences that you have in your life can be a real gift, because they require you to do this deeper work, and then at some point you realize, so if I'm creating this problem in my language, what else am I creating? And then on the other side, if I'm creating this problem in my life, not only what else am I creating that's like negative, but what could I be creating that I'm not creating, right? If I have the power of language, if I have the power of this construction, if my beliefs do have this power, what if I like channel these things in another direction, and like we're able to create from there? And so I 100% believe, I 100% agree with what you're saying. And it reminds me, I've been doing a course it's called A Course in Miracles for the last 3 years. And one of the core principles in there is that it only takes a little willingness. That's what they call it. A little willingness to let it in. And then a little willingness to like let it in a little bit more, and let it in a little bit more. And that your will, right, this desire to control, you can only do so much with it. And that the real magic comes in the surrender, or the accepting, like you were saying earlier, the accepting that if you get your own thinking out of the way, that there's something that can come through you that's infinitely more powerful. And it just reminded me of, you and I have done a lot of these personal development seminars over the years. And I remember, if looking back, I just kept doing seminar after seminar after seminar after seminar after seminar after seminar. And I look back and I realized the intention of that was to get rid of this problem that I had, right? And I was just constantly reinforcing the idea that there was something wrong with me. And if I just, and the transformation at that level hasn't happened yet, but if I just keep going, it'll happen at some point. And the impact was like, I created so many amazing things, right? So I don't regret that at all. It's like, I met you, I got married, I built businesses, I did all that stuff, but I could never get rid of the addiction. It was only in the letting go, so it wasn't something that I did. It wasn't the goal. It wasn't the next goal that I created. It actually happened in that moment where I just let go and I gave up. I gave up the control. So it's just interesting because I'm a driver personality, right? I like to create. I like to do stuff. And I really get that my desire to create my problem being gone just reinforced that there was more problem. And it was actually the allowing and the letting go and the acceptance that created that sort of final breakthrough. And now I get to be able to use this passion that I have for doing and creating in a really powerful way, because I know that it's not about me. I can get out of the way and allow that creative energy, whatever you want to call that, then use my desire to create stuff in a more powerful way.
Yeah.
So
it's like that quote where they say that whatever you resist persists.
yeah,
Whatever
exactly.
you accept disappears.
So
being in
I love
stillness, like the second you become still and present in this moment, the whole problem disappears. It's the resistance trying to find a solution. Like, I need this problem to go away. I need to find a solution. It's like we resist so much that we make the problem much bigger by doing that.
Yeah.
But if we accept it, it just goes away.
Yeah, and a lot of times the transformation happens in a moment, but it's actually our preparation of just allowing ourselves a little bit more to be open, a little bit more open. That takes so freaking long, right? Because we just resist so much. And then it's like in that magical moment, once you stop resisting, boom, it's like transformation happens. And then, of course, you go back to resisting and you get in the way of the thing that you had the transformation on. But it's amazing how that happens.
Yeah, it's like, it's funny. Just reminded me of what I read in this book, The Alchemist. It's one of my favorite books. And, that scene where Santiago is going with the Englishman on the camel, and the Englishman gives him all his books. And the boy actually tells him to observe the desert, to really communicate with the desert. And like, I haven't even read this book in such a long time, but I remember this scene so clearly. After a few days of doing each other's work, the Englishman asks the boy, he's like, so what did you learn out of all these books? He's like, well, I learned that alchemy is like this whole concept, but it's so simple that it can be written down on a grain of rice. He's like, what? This is like a much more complex, it's like a much more bigger thing, and Englishman had like spent his whole life trying to learn alchemy, and the boy was a really simple person, and he was just present with the desert. In the end, like, he's the one that cracks the code of alchemy without all the books, without all the complication of this and that. So it's like sometimes simplifying something is much better than actually. I think we tend to make things a lot more complicated with our beliefs than they actually need to be.
Mm. Yeah, the thinking. Yeah, it's so funny, right? I remember in the forum, it's like, um, just stop trying to figure it out, right? Get your mind out of the way, right? Just be with what's happening and allow yourself to, because it's experiential understanding that's where the revelation comes from, right? It's something that happens in your. It's like that knowingness is something that happens when you get your attempt to try to understand it out of out of the way. In the Course in Miracles, they always say that the difference between perception and knowledge is that knowledge is immediate. There's nothing in between it. It's an experience. So in that sense, like they talk about God, but God is in the Course in Miracles, it just means love. It's just sort of like a universal energy. So the knowledge is actually an immediate experience that surpasses language. Right? You can't try to figure it out. So the desire to figure it out is actually the thing that's in the way of the experience of it.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because I read The Alchemist when I was much younger, but I never actually got the point. So when you created that, I was like, oh yeah, I got that.
Yeah, I
That's
thought that
interesting.
was really interesting. Okay, well, I think
Awesome.
this has been a great discussion. What do you
Hmm.
think would be something that, we would leave everybody with?
Well, I think just really just consider that we have the power to create. That language is where the power is, and that whatever's going on in your life at the moment that you don't want, it's like, consider that you're creating it in some way, and then also consider that it's there to teach you something, and that we also have the power to create anything that we desire.
Also, the sooner you become open to actually learning what's being taught, the
Yeah.
sooner you can actually, you know, disappear that experience. So you don't want to resist and try to find solution after solution, but actually stop and listen. Just stop and listen to what it is that needs to happen. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we just have to stop in life and be receptive to the solution rather than being driven and trying to find the solution and I'm going to make this
Hmm.
happen. And yeah, so just
Yeah.
be receptive. Your body, your mind, your soul knows what you're dealing with and it knows what's going to help you with it. So taking a step back and just sitting in stillness really does help.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just laughing because I think this is also a story, right? But I think that's the beauty of the masculine feminine dynamic, like, and I know in my own life, you have been such a source of reflection for me and really helping me slow down and become more intuitive and be open to that God doesn't have to be some person who sits and it can be a different thing, right? And that going inside and slowing down and listening to the intuition and stillness. um, you've been such a powerful force in my life in that way, so I'm really grateful for that. So it just reminds me of the masculine is a lot of times is so energetically outward driven, and you need that receptive sort of that receptive energy so that that's where the power to create, somewhere in that yin and yang um, energy going together. Anyway, that just came into my head.
Awesome.
So
Well,
I guess inside of that, I want to say that I love you, and you've had such an incredibly powerful impact in my life. And thank you so much for bringing this conversation to me the other day, and having that lead into this conversation. And hopefully, it'll make a difference to somebody out there. So
Thank
thank you.
you. And I love you too. And yeah, I think just this is such a powerful conversation, and more people need to be talking about this because it makes a huge difference. And I think a lot of us are dealing with this in this day and age. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue to keep having the conversation.
Awesome.